Leora stood on the edge of the ruined city, staring at the smoldering remains of her home. Smoke rose from shattered towers, and the once brilliant spires that had touched the sky were now broken. Jagged shadows, the sound of wind whistling through the empty streets seemed to echo her grief. Everywhere she looked, she saw death and ruin, and it weighed heavily on her chest. She could not stop thinking about her twin sister, Selene. The memory of Selene's laughter, her voice calling to her across the battlefield, haunted Leora as if it were happening again and again. It had been weeks since the war ended, but the silence felt unnatural. The galaxy had always been alive with the hum of ships, the chatter of diplomats, and the sounds of bustling markets. Now, it was as if all that life had been extinguished. Leora's species had fought fiercely to protect their worlds, but the enemy was relentless, and the casualties had been immense. She walked slowly through the rubble, her boots crunching over debris and broken glass. Each step brought her closer to memories she wished she could forget, yet could not. She reached the square where she and Selene had trained as children, where their mother had once laughed at their reckless games. The fountain that had once stood there was cracked and dry, the water long gone. Leora knelt by the edge, brushing her hand over the stone. "I failed you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Tears burned her eyes, and she swallowed hard, trying to hold herself together. "I should have been there. I should have saved you." In truth, she had not been far from her sister when the final battle raged. But the enemy had been too strong, their weapons too powerful, and the chaos had separated them. Leora had been thrown to the ground by a blast, and when she had regained consciousness, she had seen Selene taken by the enemy. Her last expression, one of fear and determination. Leora had searched, had fought, had called out to her, but Selene was gone. The war moved on, and the survivors had no choice but to flee. As she walked through the streets, memories kept surfacing. She remembered the night before the final battle, when she and Selene had sat under the twin moons, talking about the future. They had dreamed of peace, of rebuilding their world, of raising families. Selene had promised Leora that no matter what happened, they would face it together. Leora had clung to that promise until the moment she lost her. Now, all that remained was the emptiness of absence. Leora's grief was not just for her sister. She mourned for her people, scattered and broken. The war had destroyed so much: cities, homes, families. She had seen soldiers fall, civilians crushed under the weight of battles they never wanted to fight. She had witnessed betrayal and courage, loss and sacrifice. But most of all, she had seen death claim the ones she loved. Every corner of her world seemed to remind her of what had been lost. She wandered to the outskirts of the city, where the forest had once begun. Trees, blackened and scarred by the war, reached toward the sky like skeletal hands. The ground was uneven, littered with the remnants of destroyed vehicles and fallen structures. Leora paused, sensing a faint movement among the shadows. Her hand went to the hilt of her blade, though she had not expected company. Nothing appeared, and she relaxed slightly. Her heart was always racing, as if the war had left a permanent imprint on her senses. As night fell, the twin moons rose over the horizon, casting a pale light across the devastation. Leora set up a small camp among the ruins, building a fire with remnants of wood and debris. The flames flickered, casting dancing shadows on her face. She stared into the fire, lost in thought. The stars above reminded her of all the places she had dreamed of visiting with Selene, and a pang of sorrow twisted in her chest. She reached for a small pendant she always wore, a gift from Selene, the only tangible piece of her sister that remained. She clutched it tightly, as if holding on to her sister could somehow bring her back. Hours passed, and exhaustion finally overtook her. She slept lightly, half conscious of the night sounds, half dreaming of Selene. In her dreams, she saw her sister smiling, calling to her from across a battlefield, urging her to run, to survive. Leora woke suddenly, a cold breeze brushing against her skin. She shook her head, trying to dispel the remnants of the dream. It had been too real, too vivid. She could not tell if it was memory or hope, and both hurt equally. Unknown to Leora, far across the galaxy, a human soldier named Ethan Drake had been involved in that very night. During the chaos of battle, when Leora had been struck down and left for dead, he had risked everything to carry her to safety. He had shielded her from enemy patrols, hidden her among the ruins, and ensured she was alive. No one knew, not even Leora. Ethan had returned to a remote human base after the war, believing that the alien he had saved would never know his identity. But fate had other plans. The faint signal of a distress beacon, damaged but still emitting a pulse, reached Leora's senses as she wandered the ruined outskirts. She did not understand what it was, only that it pulled her forward, deeper into the forested ruins. Each step was cautious, but curiosity mingled with grief, urging her onward. The pulse was weak, but persistent, like a heartbeat calling across the void. She had to know who or what was out there. The journey was treacherous. Broken ground and unstable ruins forced Leora to move carefully, and shadows played tricks on her eyes. She imagined enemies hiding behind every corner. Though the war had long since ended, she reminded herself that she was alone, that no one was coming to help. Yet something inside her told her that this signal was a sign. Hope, fragile as it was, began to take root. Finally, she reached the source of the signal, a collapsed observation post, half buried under rubble. The structure had once monitored the skies, guiding ships and warning of threats. Now it was silent, still, and abandoned. Leora stepped inside, her eyes scanning the debris. She noticed subtle signs, traces of someone else's presence. A makeshift shelter in one corner, supplies arranged neatly, and small, deliberate repairs to the damaged walls. It was clear she had not been alone, though she could not see anyone now. A faint object caught her eye. It was a small medkit, untouched, and beside it, a note in a language she did not fully recognize. Strange symbols, but familiar somehow. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands. Her instincts told her it was important, that it was left for her to find. A warmth spread through her chest, conflicting with the cold grief that had dominated her heart. Someone had saved her. Someone had been there, unseen, guiding her survival. For the first time in weeks, Leora felt something like hope. It was not joy, nor was it peace, but it was enough to make her move forward. She would follow this trail, discover the truth, and perhaps, in doing so, find the strength to face her grief and the shattered galaxy around her. She clutched Celine's pendant, the medkit, and the note, and stepped out of the ruined post into the dim light of dawn. The path ahead was uncertain, dangerous, and filled with ghosts of the past. But Leora walked it with determination, guided by a force she could not yet name, a force that would lead her to the human who had unknowingly saved her life. Leora moved cautiously through the twisted ruins of the observation post, her eyes scanning every shadow. The faint glow from her communicator reflected on broken panels, revealing scorched floors and collapsed walls. Dust hung in the air like a fine fog, settling on her skin as she walked. The note she had found earlier was tucked into her belt, the symbols intriguing and unfamiliar. She did not understand the language, but she sensed its importance, as if someone had left it intentionally for her. Her heart beat faster with a mix of fear and hope. Someone had been here. Someone had saved her. As she explored further, she noticed small details that had previously escaped her attention. A water filter had been carefully repaired, a bundle of rations neatly stacked, and the remnants of tools arranged in order. Each sign told a story of careful preparation and protection. Whoever had been here had thought of her, had worked to make sure she could survive the chaos of the war. She knelt to examine a piece of cloth pinned to a wall. It had been torn from a uniform, stitched carefully into a small patch that resembled a map of her home planet. She ran her fingers over the stitches, feeling the care in each line. Memories of the battlefield flashed through her mind. The screams, the explosions, the chaos that had separated her from Celine. She had been too weak to escape on her own, too disoriented to see beyond the immediate danger. But somehow, someone had been there, guiding her survival without revealing themselves. The thought filled her with a strange mixture of gratitude and curiosity. She had to know who it was. She followed a faint trail outside the post, where the terrain was uneven and littered with debris from collapsed towers and broken vehicles. The signal from the device she had found earlier pulsed faintly, leading her through narrow passages and over fallen beams. Her boots crunched against gravel and twisted metal, and the occasional distant sound of shifting rubble made her heart race. Leora kept her senses sharp, her hand always near her blade. She did not know what she might encounter. But the pull of the signal was stronger than her fear. Hours passed, and the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ruined landscape. Leora stopped to rest near a crumbling wall, leaning against it as she examined the note once more. The symbols seemed to shift slightly in the fading light, almost as if they were trying to communicate something more than words. She traced the lines with her finger, wondering if the person who left it had intended her to decode it eventually. She felt a connection to them she could not explain, a sense that her survival was not an accident. The night grew colder, and Leora built a small fire from scattered debris. She kept the flames low, not wanting to draw attention. Though the war was over, and few enemies remained, still, the instincts of a survivor lingered. A caution, honed by years of conflict. As she watched the fire flicker, she thought of Selene again. She imagined her sister's smile, the way she had always encouraged her to be brave, to keep moving even when the world seemed hopeless. Leora clenched the pendant she wore around her neck, a gift from her twin, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. She would survive, not just for herself, but to honor Selene's memory. The following morning, she continued her search. The trail led her through a forested area, the trees blackened but standing like silent sentinels. The ground was uneven, scarred by the war, with craters and broken branches making each step a challenge. She noticed signs that someone had passed through here recently, footprints that were not her own, tools left in strategic locations, even small fires that had been carefully extinguished. Whoever was guiding her was nearby, careful, patient, and thoughtful. As she navigated the forest, she found a small stream, its water surprisingly clear, despite the devastation around it. She knelt to drink, splashing her face to refresh herself. The act of survival, the simple need for water and rest, reminded her that life continued even in the midst of ruin. She felt a strange sense of comfort, knowing that someone had provided for her needs without ever revealing themselves. Each step forward brought her closer to understanding who had been her unseen guardian. By mid-afternoon, she reached a ridge overlooking a wide valley. Below, the remnants of a small human outpost were visible, partially camouflaged among the rocks and vegetation. Leora's pulse quickened. She did not know who might be there, whether friend or foe, but the signs pointed to the human presence. Her instincts told her that this was where her path would intersect with the person who had saved her. She descended carefully, moving quietly to avoid detection. As she approached, she saw a figure moving among the structures. The human soldier carried himself with a calm efficiency, checking supplies and inspecting the outpost's perimeter. Leora's heart raced. Could this be him? The one who had saved her during the battle, risking his own life to ensure hers? She stayed hidden, observing. There was a sense of purpose in his movements, a quiet courage that seemed to radiate even from a distance. Over the next several days, she observed the outpost from a safe distance, learning its routines. She saw how the human soldier, Ethan, tended to minor repairs, distributed food and medical supplies, and maintained a careful watch over the surrounding area. It became clear to her that he had not been idle during the war, that his efforts had extended far beyond what she had imagined. He had saved lives, protected survivors, and worked tirelessly to provide a measure of safety in a galaxy still scarred by conflict. One evening, as the twin moons rose, Leora approached the edge of the outpost cautiously. She had decided it was time to make contact. Her heart pounded, a mixture of fear and anticipation. She had been on her own for so long, surviving in a world that had been stripped of safety and certainty. But now, the possibility of understanding the truth, of meeting the person who had guided her survival, filled her with hope. She stepped forward, and Ethan noticed her immediately. His eyes widened in recognition, though he did not speak. Leora's gaze met his, and she felt a strange sense of familiarity, as if she had known him in some distant dream. The years of isolation and grief melted slightly in the presence of his calm and steady demeanor. She did not know how to speak, how to begin, but Ethan stepped closer, lowering his weapon as a gesture of trust. "Leora," he said softly, his voice carrying a mix of relief and caution. "You're alive." The words were simple, yet they held a weight that made her chest tighten. She nodded, unsure if she should speak or remain silent. The memories of the battlefield, the chaos, and the fear were still fresh. But now, there was someone who had been there. Someone who had cared for her, even when she could not see it. In the quiet that followed, she realized something profound. Her survival had not been an accident. The human soldier had risked everything to save her life, acting without recognition or reward. He had been a guardian, a protector in the shadows. And now she was face to face with him. Gratitude, awe, and a tentative hope filled her heart. For the first time in weeks, she felt the possibility of moving beyond grief, of seeing a future where survival was not just about enduring, but about thriving. That night, as they sat by a small fire near the outpost, Leora and Ethan did not speak much. Words were unnecessary. The shared silence carried understanding, and the quiet strength of the human soldier gave her courage she had not known she still possessed. Leora realized that her journey was far from over. But now she had a guide, a companion, someone who had shown her the true meaning of bravery and sacrifice. As she gazed into the flames, clutching Celine's pendant and the human's note, she made a promise to herself. She would honor her sister's memory by surviving, by learning, and by embracing the unexpected bond that had saved her life. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and uncertain. But with courage, trust, and the quiet heroism she had witnessed, she felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. The morning sun broke over the horizon, painting the ruined landscape in shades of gold and gray. Leora stepped out of the shelter near the outpost, her eyes scanning the distant remains of the battlefield. The memory of her twin sister, Celine, lingered like a shadow at the edge of her mind, but today the shadow felt slightly lighter. She had discovered someone had saved her. Someone who had risked everything for her life. That realization gave her a strange strength she hadn't felt in weeks. Ethan was already outside, checking the perimeter and inspecting the remaining supplies. He looked up when he saw her approach. A small, approving nod, acknowledging her presence. Leora's heart beat faster at the sight of him, not with fear, but with a new sense of purpose. He had been her silent protector, unseen and unrecognized, and now she knew the truth. She stepped closer, careful not to startle him, and the two of them began walking toward the edge of the outpost. Moving through the broken forest, Leora spoke first, her voice hesitant but firm. "You saved me," she said, the words heavy with emotion. I didn't know who it was until now." "Why did you do it?" Ethan looked at her, his eyes calm and steady. "Because you had a chance to survive. You didn't ask for help. But the galaxy doesn't care about what we deserve. Someone had to act." His tone was simple, yet it carried a depth that made Leora realize the weight of his actions. He had risked his life for a stranger, without expectation, without reward, simply because it was the right thing to do. Leora fell silent, her mind racing with questions and gratitude. She had wandered through death and devastation, believing she had been completely alone. But here was someone who had been there all along, guiding her, keeping her alive. The realization made her feel both relief and awe. She had never imagined that humans, so far removed from her world, could show such courage and selflessness. They continued walking in silence for a while, moving carefully through the uneven terrain. Broken towers and scorched trees surrounded them, evidence of the war's destruction. Yet despite the ruins, there were signs of life, small shoots of grass breaking through the soil, tiny creatures returning to the forest. It reminded Leora that life persisted, even in the most unlikely places, and perhaps she, too, could find a way to move forward. Ethan led her to a small clearing where he had set up a makeshift camp. It was modest, but organized and clean. Supplies were neatly arranged, and a small generator hummed quietly, providing power for lights and communication devices. Leora observed the care with which he had maintained this place. Every detail seemed intentional, every action purposeful. She realized that he had thought of her even before she had arrived, preparing for her survival in subtle ways that she was only now beginning to understand. As they settled near the campfire, Leora noticed the subtle scars on Ethan's arms and hands. They were not severe, but enough to tell a story of battles fought, of danger faced. She felt a growing respect for him, not only for what he had done for her, but for who he was. A human who could endure so much, who could act with such courage in the face of unimaginable chaos. "I want to know everything," she said finally, her voice quiet but determined. "Tell me how you saved me. I need to understand." Ethan nodded and began recounting the events of that night. He told her how he had been assigned to a covert mission behind enemy lines, how he had seen her fall during the battle, and how he had carried her to safety, dodging patrols and navigating dangerous terrain. He spoke of the moments when he feared he might lose her, of the decisions he had to make to keep her alive, and of the quiet determination that had driven him to act despite overwhelming odds. Leora listened intently, absorbing every detail. The story was both frightening and inspiring, and she could feel the weight of his courage. She realized that her survival had not been chance. It had been deliberate, guided by a being who believed in the value of life, in the possibility of hope. She felt a deep gratitude, a connection that transcended words or species. For hours, they spoke, sharing their experiences and fears. Leora told Ethan about her life before the war, about her bond with Selene, and the dreams they had shared. Ethan listened with patience and understanding, never interrupting, never judging. He shared his own experiences, though with less detail, focused more on the actions he had taken than the emotions he had felt. Yet in his calm demeanor and measured words, Leora sensed a quiet strength, a depth of character that inspired trust and admiration. As night fell, they prepared a simple meal together, the act of working side by side creating a sense of partnership. Leora realized that for the first time since the war, she felt safe. Not just physically, but emotionally. She could breathe without the constant weight of grief pressing on her chest. She could think without the chaos of battle clouding her mind. And she could hope, even just a little, that the galaxy might still hold kindness and courage, even after all she had endured. Over the next few days, Leora and Ethan began to explore the surrounding area together. The terrain was dangerous, filled with remnants of battle and unpredictable hazards. But their combined skills made them effective. Leora's knowledge of her world and its hidden paths complemented Ethan's strategic thinking and human ingenuity. Together, they moved through the ruins with purpose, finding survivors, securing resources, and restoring small pockets of safety. With each step, Leora grew stronger, more confident. She discovered that her grief, while still present, could coexist with hope. She learned to trust not only Ethan, but herself. She realized that survival was not just about enduring hardship, it was about adapting, learning, and finding allies in unexpected places. The human who had saved her became both guide and companion, a symbol of the courage and compassion that could exist even in the darkest times. One evening, as they rested on a hill overlooking a small settlement they had helped secure, Leora reflected on how far she had come. The memory of Selene still lingered, but it no longer felt like a chain holding her to the past. Instead, it was a reminder of why she fought to survive, why she sought out life and hope even after witnessing so much death. She glanced at Ethan, who was checking the perimeter, and felt a deep sense of respect and gratitude. The human had given her a chance to live, to find purpose again, and to embrace the possibility of the future. Their bond grew quietly, built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and the understanding that actions often spoke louder than words. Leora realized that she did not need to rush her feelings or force herself to define them. For now, survival and understanding were enough. She had a companion she could trust, a human who had acted selflessly when the galaxy had seemed cruel and indifferent. And with that knowledge, she felt a sense of peace she had not known since the war began. As night settled over the valley, Leora sat by the campfire, Selene's pendant resting against her chest. She felt the warmth of the flames and the presence of her human companion beside her. And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond grief. She did not know what challenges still awaited, what dangers might rise from the ruins of the war. But she knew that with courage, trust, and the bond she shared with Ethan, she could face them. The stars above twinkled like distant beacons of hope, and Leora whispered a quiet promise to her sister. "I will survive, Selene. I will honor you, and I will make sure your memory lives on." She looked at Ethan, who met her gaze with calm understanding. In that moment, words were unnecessary. The shared silence carried meaning, a recognition that even in a galaxy scarred by war, bravery and compassion could light a path forward. The next morning, they set out together toward new territories, ready to face whatever dangers and opportunities the post-war galaxy might hold. Leora had found more than survival. She had found a companion, a protector, and a reminder that even in the darkest times, courage and humanity could shine brightly. And as they moved forward, the faint pulse of hope she had felt from the first note grew stronger, guiding her toward a future where grief, courage, and life could coexist. The days passed quickly as Leora and Ethan moved through the post-war galaxy, helping survivors and rebuilding small communities. Every place they visited bore scars of the conflict, burned-out cities, abandoned villages, and broken starports. But they also found signs of resilience. Plants sprouted through cracked concrete. Children laughed despite hunger. And elders spoke of hope even after losing everything. Leora watched all of this carefully, feeling a quiet determination grow inside her. The war had taken so much, but it had not destroyed the will to live. Ethan walked beside her as they guided a group of refugees through a narrow canyon, his eyes constantly scanning for danger. Leora admired his calm focus, the way he seemed to anticipate problems before they occurred. She had never seen someone move with such precision, yet remain gentle with those who needed care. It reminded her again of the night he had saved her, of the careful planning, courage, and patience that had preserved her life when the battlefield had seemed impossible to survive. She realized that his heroism was not in grand gestures, but in small, deliberate actions, acts of thoughtfulness and courage that had saved countless lives. One afternoon, they reached a settlement perched on a plateau above a river. The place had been partially destroyed during the war, but the people were determined to rebuild. Leora and Ethan assisted in clearing rubble, repairing shelters, and distributing supplies. The humans and aliens working side by side created an atmosphere of cooperation that Leora had not witnessed before. She felt proud to be part of something larger than herself, to see hope returning to a broken galaxy. As night fell, Leora and Ethan sat near the river, watching the water flow quietly under the stars. The sound was soothing, almost meditative. And for the first time, Leora allowed herself to relax completely. She reached for Selene's pendant and held it in her hands, feeling its weight as a reminder of the past. Yet instead of pain, she felt determination. She had survived, not by chance, but because someone had believed in her survival. Someone had acted when no one else could. And now, she had a chance to honor her sister's memory by helping others. Ethan glanced at her, his expression calm but full of understanding. "You've come a long way," he said softly. "I can see it in your eyes. You're not the same person I saved weeks ago." Leora smiled faintly, the gesture small but genuine. "I know. I still miss her," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I also understand now. I am not alone anymore. And I can still make a difference." Ethan nodded. "That's what survival is about. It's not just living through the moment. It's finding the strength to keep moving, to help others, to create something better from the ashes." His words carried weight, and Leora felt the truth of them sink in. She had been lost in grief for so long, but now she understood that the galaxy still had purpose, still had meaning beyond loss. The next morning, they continued their journey. Leora noticed the subtle ways Ethan prepared for each step. His careful planning and attention to detail. He anticipated dangers, ensured supplies were secure, and always considered the well-being of those around him. She realized that humans, though often underestimated, could be extraordinary in courage, ingenuity, and empathy. He had saved her life not with sheer power, but with careful thought, bravery, and the willingness to put himself at risk for another being. As they traveled, they encountered a small group of alien survivors trapped in a collapsed tunnel. Leora and Ethan worked together to free them, using improvised tools and sheer determination. The people were frightened and weak, but the combined efforts of the human and alien quickly restored hope. Leora marveled at the teamwork, realizing that survival and heroism could cross species and cultures. In that moment, she understood the true meaning of alliance and cooperation. When the last survivor was safely guided to the plateau, Leora paused, breathing deeply. She looked at Ethan, his hands covered in dirt and scratches, yet his eyes steady and calm. She felt gratitude that went beyond words. A deep connection formed through shared struggles and the recognition of courage. "I don't know how to thank you enough," she said quietly. "You saved me. You gave me a second chance at life." Ethan shook his head, a small smile touching his lips. "I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just did what had to be done. But seeing you here, alive and determined, that's enough for me." For days after, they worked together to rebuild the settlement. Leora began taking more initiative, leading teams, strategizing resource distribution, and encouraging the survivors. She discovered a strength within herself she hadn't known existed. And with Ethan by her side, she felt capable of facing anything. The grief for her sister remained, but it no longer dominated her life. Instead, it became a source of motivation, a reason to survive, to act, and to help others. One evening, after a long day of work, Leora climbed a hill overlooking the valley. She held Celine's pendant tightly, staring at the stars. "I wish you were here, Celine," she whispered. "But I promise, I will honor you. I will survive. I will make sure your memory lives on in every life we help, in every community we rebuild." She let the words settle in her heart, feeling a sense of peace she had not experienced since the war began. Ethan joined her silently, standing beside her as they watched the night sky. The twin moons reflected in the river below, casting a soft light over the landscape. For a moment, the world seemed calm, as if the galaxy itself were breathing after the chaos of war. Leora felt a connection to everything around her, the survivors, the land, and the human who had saved her life. The bond they shared was unspoken yet powerful, built on trust, courage, and the understanding that actions often mattered more than words. As weeks passed, Leora and Ethan continued their journey, traveling to scattered settlements and aiding survivors. They became known as a team that could be relied upon, a symbol of hope in a galaxy still healing from war. Leora's confidence grew with each successful mission, and she began to see the potential for a brighter future. She was no longer the grieving twin wandering through ruins. She was a leader, a protector, and a survivor. One day, as they returned to the plateau overlooking the river, Leora paused to reflect. The journey had been long and difficult, but she had learned so much. She had discovered that courage came in many forms, not only in fighting battles, but in protecting others, in making choices for the greater good, and in holding on to hope when all seemed lost. She had witnessed humanity at its best, and she understood now why the human who had saved her had acted without hesitation or expectation. Ethan noticed her quiet reflection and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've grown stronger than you know," he said, "and you're not alone anymore. The galaxy still has dangers, but it also has hope, and together we can help preserve it." Leora nodded, a sense of gratitude and determination filling her. She knew that the path ahead would not be easy, but she was ready. The lessons of the war, the memory of her sister, and the courage of the human who had saved her had all combined to give her purpose. She would face the future with strength, hope, and the knowledge that she was never truly alone. That night, they built a small memorial on the hill, placing Celine's pendant and a human token, a simple badge Ethan had carried since the rescue, together as a symbol. It represented both the bond between species and the enduring courage that had saved lives. Leora stood back and looked at the memorial, feeling a deep sense of peace. She whispered one final promise to her sister. "I will live, Celine. I will honor you, and I will help others, just as he helped me." The stars above twinkled like distant witnesses to her vow. The galaxy was vast and still scarred by war. But with courage, trust, and compassion, there was hope for recovery. Leora and Ethan looked at each other, knowing that their journey was far from over, yet confident that together they could face whatever came next. And as they descended the hill toward the settlement, a renewed sense of purpose guided them forward, a testament to survival, courage, and the unexpected heroes who could appear even in the darkest times.